Hello class, I'm going to review some basic shading for you tonight. Now in class I talked about the shaded sphere, and I'm going to review that and kind of start to incorporate a little bit of what I was talking about with linear perspective in terms of creating these ellipses. Now this I thought would be good to use because it's a pretty simple form and it includes the shaded sphere. It's actually a pawn from a chess set that I have, so I took this picture with my cell phone. Now one thing about cell phone pictures, they do tend to be a little bit distorted and they have a really narrow depth of field. For those of you who have not taken photo, what I mean by that is there's only like a very small area when they're in focus if you take a picture of something close up. So I'm going to compensate for that a little bit, and I'm just going to jump right in. Now, one of the things that I just discovered as I was getting organized for this was that I actually left some of my pencils in my classroom, so we're just going to make the best of what I have. I'm going to start this drawing with what is an HB or number 2 pencil. This is just like your standard Papermate Sharpwriter. It's just like an inexpensive mechanical pencil. I draw with these all the time. One of the reasons why I like to start with this for my demo is that I need to remember I need to be able to move pretty fast, and I don't like having to sharpen my pencil. Okay, so I'm just going to start by creating a circle. And I'm drawing very lightly. I'm just gently tracing that form. Now, when I look at the proportions of this, what I'm noticing is that that top ball is just a little less than a third of the overall form. So I'm going to kind of keep that in mind. I think I want it to end here and up here. I'm going to draw it pretty large just so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay. So sometimes, when I'm dealing with proportions, I will put my top and my bottom in. And that gives me kind of a better sense of what I'm working with. Another way to go would be to start in the middle of the form and then go either way. So I'm gonna, now I've just very lightly indicated my basic proportions. I doubt you can even see that. And I cannot even tell you just how gentle I am as I start to lay this out. Now, as I've mentioned in class, one of the things that's really important about creating a form that is symmetrical is to create a center line. Now, the center of my paper, or the edge of my paper, is right below what you can see on your screen. But I'm just using the edge of the paper to help me find the line that is going to be just perpendicular to my bottom edge and parallel to the side. I could also do that with a ruler, or I could freehand it, but one thing that I notice with students is a lot of times if they just freehand it, their form is like kind of leaning one way or the other, especially if you're drawing at a table. Okay, so now I have a center line. I have my top circle here floating like a balloon, and now I'm just going to start to break down my form into some of its other components. So if I go halfway between the bottom of my circle and the bottom of this, I'm going to hit a point kind of right where the back of that circle would be if I could see it. So I'm just going to draw in that ellipse, and I should probably draw just a little bit darker than I normally would, just so that you can even see what I'm doing. Probably think I've got my invisible ink out. One of the reasons why I draw very lightly is because as I freehand my forms, I'm kind of finding them with the gesture of my arm. I draw with my wrist fairly straight, and I work from my arm, which is good because it will save your wrist over time, because I know you guys are going to be lifelong drawers. The other thing that it does is it keeps things from wavering quite as much. Okay, so now I have something that is reasonably similar to my form in my picture. And I'm just kind of looking where things line up. I'm noticing that if I were to go down from this edge, this edge is just a little bit more, and then this one lines up. So if I go down, I'm noticing that I actually need to bring the bottom of my pawn out just a little bit, and I need to bring this out just a little bit. Now, because I have my center line, when I adjust one side, it's pretty easy for me to go through and adjust the other side. Now, in my source photo, my pawn is actually leaning a little bit, just from camera distortion. So I'm kind of glad to be correcting that. Okay. All right. So now that I have my basic form sketched in really lightly, I'm going to go through and I'm going to start to define some edges that I know are going to be a little bit darker. And I'm hoping my circle comes out okay. Now, I don't usually like to draw flat. And if I do, I'm usually leaning pretty far out over my paper. If I'm drawing on a table, a lot of times I'll stand. But with my demo, I really need to stay out of the way. So we're just going to hope for the best. Okay, so that seems pretty good. Now, even though this is a mechanical pencil, I have it extended. I have my lead extended like, pretty far out of the pencil, and I'm using it on its side. Now, in a few minutes, I'm going to switch to my other pencils, and I could do a significant amount of this drawing with my trusty Sharpwriter, but I want to teach you what some of the different pencils do. Unfortunately, one of the pencils that I use the most when I'm doing graphite drawings is a 4B, and that is something that I do not have. And since I am not leaving my apartment anytime soon, we're just gonna compensate for that. One of the things that we need to remember with art is that it's important to make do with what we have. Now, I'm noticing in this, this ellipse down here is rounder than these ones. In my drawing, maybe they're a little bit more even. So I'm going to go through and just kind of bring this curve down slightly. And because I'm drawing lightly and that area is shaded, it's not even going to matter. Okay. So I'm probably going to be doing this drawing in two parts. In this first part, what I'm doing is I'm just going to establish some very light shading. And what I'm careful to do as I'm starting my drawing out is I make sure that I'm drawing gently enough to leave the grain of my paper. You might notice that I'm working my pencil on its edge, and I'm just kind of going in different directions with my hatching so I get a nice even start. One of the reasons why it's so important to not press too hard and make sure that you retain some of the grain of your paper is that when we do a graphite drawing, we need to be able to layer our graphite. So once the graphite really is on there solid, like when it gets shiny, the softer pencils will no longer stick. Now we can use that to our advantage, but in general it's something we really want to avoid at this early stage. So if I'm painting, a lot of times I'll push my darkest and lightest values really, really hard early on, at least if I'm working with oil or watercolor or oil or acrylic. But with graphite drawing and watercolor or ink wash, I need to just kind of creep up on those values, just very gentle. And I'm just using very even pressure. Sometimes my hatching even starts to go in almost like a circular direction. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna stop there and we will continue on with some different graphite.